Come all you roving cowboys, bow down your souls by land. I'll tell to you a story while you around me stand. I'm going to quit this wild west, these bleak and stormy plains.
At the beginning of the 1800s, it was of great concern that a crisis was brewing between America and Great Britain. In the early 19th century, Britain sought to reclaim its hold on the colonies lost during the American Revolution. This led to the inevitable War of 1812, a conflict which many historians agree is the real war for American independence. During the war, the British Navy placed blockades that prevented the United States from importing many precious cargoes from Europe, the most crucial of these being gunpowder, and its primary ingredient, potassium nitrate, most commonly known as saltpeter.
As far as the need for gunpowder for the War of 1812, the War of 1812 was brought about by a few various and sundry things. As a matter of fact, some people consider the War of 1812 to be the real American Revolution. Now, I know for a fact that some of the issues that were going on, there were some trade and economic issues and things like that that were causing some problems. But I think one of the bigger issues behind the War of 1812 was the issue of something called impressment. Apparently, British Navy vessels were pulling up alongside American vessels and forcing American sailors into service for the British Royal Crown. Basically, they were kidnapping American sailors and forcing them to serve on British warships. And there's a lot of people took a pretty dim view of that sort of thing.
Well, of course, once the war breaks out, we, trade with England, with Great Britain is stopped, which caused a great deal of consternation, particularly with what we call the carrying states, which were the New England states. They lose their trade to shipping stopped, and so they lose a good part of their economy. No longer trading back and forth with Europe, and of course, a consequence of that trade is home production. One of the most important products we got from England was explosives, saltpeter, and with that gone, I mean that's used for a variety of reasons up through the 1820s. I mean, it's not just gunpowder. So the importance of this commodity transcends the war, I think.
A domestic gunpowder source had to be located, and after an extensive prospecting endeavor, it was discovered that one of the most abundant sources of saltpeter was limestone caves in the southeastern United States, mostly located in Kentucky, which consequently became the most profitable producer of saltpeter during the war.
As far as the overall production and the impact that this particular mine had for the Revolutionary War, I'm not really sure. But basically, every little bit counts, because at the time in the War of 1812, we've been getting our gunpowder from Britain. Well, Britain's not going to sell us gunpowder to use in a war against them. So we needed every bit we could have. Now, I know that there's other caves in Kentucky that probably produced a lot more potassium nitrate than this mine did. And certainly a lot of potassium nitrate was produced in the Red River Gorge area. The sandstone rock overhangs were a favorite spot for locals to earn a little extra money.
For a mining operation such as in this shelter here, it required no special skill, and it required no special tools. The common tools that are found on any frontier farm could have worked here. Basically, you need a mallet or a sledge to break up the rock, a drill to drill the holes into the sandstone to break off the large pieces of the rock, and a froe to split the shingles to produce your leaching vats. And with that, you're all set.
In fact, the saltpeter mine at Carter Cave State Resort Park in Carter County, Kentucky, was at one time one of the nation's best-kept secrets.
Now, as far as the way that the miners lived while they worked the mine here at Carter Caves, as far as we know, once the miners went in, they didn't come out of the cave. Now, conditions had to have been pretty rough on them. The cave's about 44 degrees year-round, and to the best of our knowledge, they probably worked 12-hour shifts. What they would do is they would dig the dirt that actually contains the nitrates that they're after, and they would bring those to staging areas where the materials would be processed. Now, as far as the environment in Saltpeter Cave, which kind of pays to the working conditions of the miners once again, is that, number one, it's a dry cave. There's not really water actively moving through this cave at all. And this is exactly the kind of setting that the early pioneers looked for, because you only find potassium nitrate in dry caves or dry rock overhangs. And that goes for calcium nitrate too. Actually, the nitrates here are calcium nitrate, but they actually converted it to potassium nitrate. So as far as the working conditions go, 44 to 47 degrees year-round, someplace in that vicinity. Very dry, very dusty conditions. There's places in Saltpeter Cave that are so dry and so dusty that the floor is covered with a dry silt, would be the only way to put it. Imagine crawling through something about 6 inches deep that's the consistency of baby powder. That's the conditions that they were working.
Saltpeter is relatively easy to produce, and with the price of this commodity at an all-time high, many common citizens jumped at the chance to earn some much-needed capital. Many of the tools involved in the mining process would already be readily available on a frontier homestead. The only problem related to the production of the saltpeter was that potassium nitrate was not naturally occurring in the limestone caves. But calcium nitrate was in great abundance. This required an elaborate conversion process to obtain the potassium nitrate needed to produce gunpowder. This process was actually quite simple to set up, but was very time-consuming.
In order to produce the potassium nitrate, the miners would dig the material and transport it to a central processing area. And as they worked their way through the cave, they'd actually move these sites periodically so they wouldn't have to travel quite so far. What they would do is they would take the dirt to a central point where they would have vats, and underneath the vats they would have wooden troughs. Now, to process the material, the wooden vats, they would actually build a filter within these. And the filter would consist of a layer of small saplings, about the size of my pinky, then a layer of straw, and a layer of potash. Potash is the ashes left over from burning hardwood. And they would repeat that layering process, the saplings, the straw, and the potash. And they would build a filter about so deep, just a few inches. Now, on top of that filter, they would place the material that they dug from elsewhere in the cave. Then they'd pour water in it. And as the water filters through, it drains through the dirt and drains through the filter underneath it, comes out into the trough underneath that. Then they would have someone stand there and dip the water out, pour it back into the top of the trough as it drains through. They'd recycle the same water for about 48 hours. And they actually called that job making the liquor or the niter beer, because after a period of time it would actually take on a sort of an amberish color and even develop a froth or a foam on top of it, kind of like beer does. So as they did this, this actually accomplished two tasks. Number one is it moved the nitrates from the soil, but the nitrates in the soil in Saltpeter Cave are not potassium nitrates, they're calcium nitrates. So as they filtered it through, the calcium nitrate would come in contact with the potash, and it converts it to calcium nitrate. Now, you have to ask a chemist exactly how that works. We just know that it does.
Right, well, it's a simple metathesis reaction, which is a big word for just, you're essentially swapping the cation. Okay, you had calcium nitrate and you want potassium nitrate. So you mix it up with potassium carbonate. When you mix those two together, you end up with calcium carbonate, which precipitates. Right, so it'll fall out of the solution and leaves you with potassium nitrate. But you take that, filter off the stuff you don't want, and evaporate to get the potassium nitrate. So it's a very simple process that is not difficult to do.
So as they convert it and extract it, after about 48 hours, they would take the bucket of niter beer that they get, they'd take it out of the cave and boil it in large kettles. And boiling it in large kettles drives the water off of it. The nitrate crystals collect around the sides of the pot, and they dig those out. There's your potassium nitrate.
When the War of 1812 ended, the large majority of the cave mining operation shut down. However, production on a small scale sustained itself by producing gunpowder for local consumption, but only as a seasonal labor which mainly produced extra income. Gunpowder production in the United States for the most part no longer existed as a necessary industry, because at the close of the war, trade with Europe was restored.
That the miners that worked in here were patriots, and they were doing their part to help to secure our continued freedom in the United States. And I don't want to see the honor and the sacrifice that they put forth to do that be overshadowed by conjecture of things that we really don't know about, or things that really didn't happen. It's okay to conject, but I don't want the folklore to overshadow how really amazing what they did there was. That's something important to remember, because, like I said, they were patriots.
In 1814 we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we caught the bloody British in a town in New Orleans. We fired our guns and the British kept coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to run down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. We looked down the river and we see the British come, and they must have been 100 of them beating on the drum. We stepped so high and they made the bugles ring. We stood beside our cottontails and didn't say a word. As many as there was